All right, welcome back. We are sitting here with Washington coach Dan Quinn, who did go to Hawaii, but not recently. Didn't bring that weather to Indy.
No, we did not. And it is awesome to be on with you guys. There's always like a freshness that comes along with this time of year. And like season's done, that one, the whole season's beginning again. Like there's like a turning the page moment, so to speak, that takes place here. I don't know if you guys feel that every year or not. After a year ago, sitting here after a good season, and sitting here today after not nearly enough wins, and you want that same page to turn no matter what, and so I like that.
Let's start with the freshness. You have a lot of freshness in your building,
yes,
on your staff. We'll start with a young man named David Blough, who I covered in an all-star game.
Right on.
Why was this young man the right guy to lead your offense?
Yeah, he's been with the program for us for 2 years and transitioned from playing into coaching, and along with Cliff and Brian Johnson and Davita Pritchard, we kind of had a very strong quarterback pipeline with Jayden and Marcus and others in the room, and so it was clear to see, like most good coaches, a real vision of how and what you're looking to do, and so that was very evident, in meeting with David, and the fact that he has already, had 2 years experience, with our team. We got to see him, how good he's been for firsthand. It's different than a player where you get to see him on the field. With coaches, you get to see them internally about how strong they are.
If you guys will let me, I'll tell you a funny story about him. I remember when Christian Gonzalez was here at the Combine.
Yes.
And his sister, of course,
yes,
is an Olympian.
There's a lot of speed from that side of the family.
Married to David Blough. And
That's
I
correct.
said to Christian Gonzalez, who is the most competitive member of your family? And he said, my brother-in-law.
Yes. Just awesome to see like how well Christian's done, Melissa, the athleticism, all of it's really amazing. And he is definitely the slowest of the three. David, Melissa, and Christian, that's no slouch on David either.
Dan, when you guys hired David Blough to lead the offense, and he's a big deal because you're a defensive head coach, of course, he's running this offense, but he doesn't have that much experience.
Right.
And a lot of folks around the league did want him. He was in demand. There's no question about that. When you were doing these interviews, it's a projection. You don't know how he's actually going to call an offense. So how do you try to determine that as best as possible during this interview process to make sure he is the guy?
Yeah, I think all of us, before we got the jobs we had, you hadn't done it. You had to take your shot. And I leaned back being in a head coaching position for the second time. You want to learn some lessons from your first one. And leaving Atlanta, some coaches had left our staff to go to other spaces, and they ended up doing just fine. They hadn't been coordinators before, and they went on to become coordinators and head coaches.
You're talking about LaFleur and McDaniel.
About Mike McDaniel and Mike LaFleur now and Matt LaFleur, and I thought, here I am, 10 years later, and how am I not going to repeat the same mistake? So sometimes you can apply that lesson later to say, okay, this guy's a heavy hitter. And yes, he hasn't called it. Yes, he hasn't. But in your gut that the person's ready. And so I had that, feeling with David, knowing much like I did years back, and with Mike and Matt and others, to say, okay, all of us were in that spot one day, and you give him their shot, and he's off to a great start.
How will the offense change with him running it? Will there be a lot of change?
There'll be some change, Pete, and all of us, if we had the same playbook, we'd call it differently anyway. So there'll be some new things for sure for us that David's vision will be. It's difficult to run someone else's offense, so to speak. You have to have your own style and identity that goes into that. And I'm excited for our players to feel David. They know him, with the quarterbacks. And so it's cool to see now him build that tie with the running backs and the O-line and the tight ends and others. So that's one of the fun parts about this spring.
Let me ask you about your quarterback, Jayden Daniels. How is he different off of the season you had versus who he was off of the success of season one?
Right. I would say much like we are here, we talked about turning the page of after a good season or after one that didn't have anywhere near enough wins. What I can tell you about Jayden Daniels, he is an absolute savage of a competitor. He loves it. And so he loves football, going all the way back to the draft process, 2 years ago now. Meetings fine, going down to LSU Pro Day fine. You want to see him light up, go put the film on, because that's where he felt most at home, best able to express who he was. So you wanted to the interview setting, good, yes. Like a lot of the guys here felt very business-like. They're rehearsed, so to speak. But you want to put the game film on and hear him talk football, that's when you find out how strong and diligent he is. So I think what all of us will know is like this competitor is the real thing, and we can't wait to,
so he's
to get rolling
angrier,
with him.
is what you're
yes,
saying.
Yes, I would say both he and his coach are very competitively angry in a very positive way.
We're talking about Jayden Daniels, one of the younger players on your team. The Commanders last year were, I would say, by far the oldest team in the NFL, and that seemed, I think, probably fairly intentional for you all. A lot of coaches like to get the young guys because they're malleable. You can mold them, right? What is the intention behind the construction of the 2026 Washington Commanders?
Yeah, I think like speed and youth. Obviously, that's like always a good thing because you're getting to develop where you're going to go as you're getting through draft picks and you're developing those guys and adding some younger free agents. I enjoy that part of the development of players, and so getting a chance to add some of that to our team this year, definitely a priority, and definitely one that I'm looking forward to because it's one of the parts of coaching that I really enjoy. And so for the player, even when they're a good player, can you get them from one spot to the next? And when you do that, it raises other people as well. And so the development part, I like doing that with players. I also like doing that with coaches. People see me as a developmental, the players, but I also like it's developmental for people, for coaches to grow and rise. And so that's why guys like David Blough and Daronte Jones and others that are joining our staff, it lights me up to see where we can go.
You touched on this a little bit, but last year you come here, you have a rookie quarterback, you go to the championship game. Usually in those scenarios, you sit back, you say, okay, this is going to be something that's going to be sustainable for a while, and yet then you have the season like you do. As a coach, how does that challenge you kind of, because the league can humble you quickly.
Oh, yeah. And I think for me as the coach, one man staying consistent, knowing that this was a really tough chapter. But it's not our story. But it is a tough chapter, and you acknowledge it. And the only thing I want to do is bring the lessons from the season forward and making sure we're not doing those again and what can we handle differently. So that takes a lot of time to keep thinking what we're going to change as you're going through these sparks. But I also recognize that ain't our story, but it is the one from last year, and it sucked. And it's hard when you go through it. There's lessons that will be paid forward 26, 27, and 28. From the tough year of 25, but we had to go through them. I don't like it, but we're sure not going to miss them, the lessons.
Dan, you mentioned Daronte Jones, your new defensive coordinator. Last year you wound up taking over defensive play calling duties. What did you learn from that? What are you going to do this upcoming season with a first-time defensive play coordinator? Defensive coordinator.
Yeah, and Daronte, he'll be the play caller for sure. And I like learning new and where there's change coming. Probably the last time I felt this way, John, was probably in 2021. I'd run a same system from Seattle through Atlanta for maybe 8 years and up to maybe like 2020. And so going to Dallas, what was going to be different and how would we match things, and corners that played off some to go. And so that type of change provided good results, takeaways, things that were different. And so going through this again, I like that Daronte's had some years in the system that he's bringing to us. He knows where some of the good and bad is indifferent. Why don't you do that against empty or what? And so seeing that to go, he has a very, very good vision of what it can look like, should look like, the standards for it. So it's been fun to start. I like learning new. Also, like full disclosure, not everything's new. There's only so many things that we all do on offense, on defense, so that's different. I like that. So knowing those things are important, but I like what we're adding, to the system for sure.
And you mentioned one other thing earlier about the offense and how it's going to look a little different. And we can't let you get out of here without okay, well, what's going to be different?
Sure.
Is that Jayden under center more what? Without giving away
to
your week one opponent what you're doing, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, I don't know who we're playing in week one yet. So I think what you'll see, that we will work under center some more than we have in the past. To what degree? Let's find out. The fun part about the next 2 months, who are you adding? How do you feature those players in unique ways? That's at tight end and running back and receiver. And so when you put those pieces in and then you start to practice, You start concepts, what's good, how do we feature them into those spaces? So that will determine and dictate a lot. You want to really game plan around things that the players do well. Good news, we know who's behind center, and we can certainly know what he does well. So we start from there, and then how do we add pieces around Jayden? So he was definitely a big thought behind how we're going to play, and that leads into free agency, the draft, and everything else too.
All right, well, before we fully let you go, what's your favorite part of the Combine? Besides talking to us.
Besides talking to that is clearly one, but if I had to pick a 1B, I like the interview process with the players and getting to know their story, getting to know their whys.
Even though they're rehearsed?
They are rehearsed. We try to get them off that as quick as we can. And
by doing what? How do you disarm them? How do you get them off
sometimes we'll just throw a picture up on the on the screen of, might be their high school. Tell me about this, what was that like? Or, a picture of them with their family, like, who is this? What does that make you feel? Or a picture of their stadium, like, take me through the week leading up to the game. And so just having some pictures that they did not know. Sometimes it's funny, like we had one yesterday from a restaurant at a small town in Alabama, like, what are we ordering here? And so it just kind of disarms a little bit, because this is just the first part of it. It's not the only time we're going to visit with them. As tough as the pandemic was, we learned we can get a lot of information on Zoom and meetings and doing that. And so that happens through March. You get on the calls, go through it. I have been really impressed by some of the players that I've met here. The football knowledge, their way to go. And so that part I like a lot. And as you go through March and you look back at your notes, what it was, but that's my favorite part.
Awesome.
Next to this.
Next to this. Of course. Of course.
Well, we appreciate the time, as always. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for having me on.